Good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to say that it's a pleasure to be here in Tecnicelpa, and it's very comfortable to see that in the room there are a lot of young people, which means that in spite we are going to talk about, but Fernando will talk about the risks for this industry. I think that looking to the audience, I think it's very, very comfortable and I'm very confident that the future is not a problem in this industry. Let me introduce Fernando. As I said, he is going to talk about the global risks and their potential impacts in the pulp and paper industry. Fernando is in MARSH for 20 years. He is now the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of MARSH Advisory Portugal. In the last 20 years, he was leading multiple areas, doing multiple tasks as trade credit specialty, marketing and communication, compliance, sales, e-business development. Fernando is coming from the communication area. He's having a degree in public relations by Escola Superior de Comunicação Social de Lisboa and a post-degree in marketing by EPAM. And in last year, he was concluding something very important and very actual. The executive education in sustainable finance, green and climate finance, sustainability studies by ISEC. This is the big challenge I think that our companies are going to face now. It's not in the future, it's now. Fernando is also presenting the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report in Portugal for more than 10 years, representing March McLean Group as the entity who participates since first edition in 2006. Please, the stage is yours.
Can you hear me well? Okay. What does a guy from public relations and communications does working at risk? Guys, neither myself was thinking about 20 years ago. I started my career in the trade credit area where I knew Mr. Dolores Ferreira for a long time. Good negotiations we had at that time. When I came to Coimbra today, I was thinking about who would be the people that I will be talking to. So I would like to interact with you, just asking you to raise your hand so that please identify yourself, those who work in the risk area or those who work with risks. Whew. So it will be a great challenge for myself to talk to you about risks. Once is probably the most boring thing that you'll be hearing today. Well, let me try. Okay, guys. First of all, thanks a lot to Tecnicelpa to invite me and to be present here to show you how important is today this global risks report that the World Economic Forum organizes since 18 editions and where Marsh McLennan is one of the participants and the only one since the first edition. Global risks, important. Global risks are those ones that may affect people and organizations on a global way. Sometimes we have local and specific risks in our activities that are not necessarily global, But we must think about how they can be affected by global ones. And we will be talking about this during our session today, and you will also see some risks that Google helped me a lot, and intelligence, artificial intelligence helped me also a lot, because I'm not an expert in pulp and paper. You are the experts. So, Global Risks Report, as I mentioned to you, is a publication that has 18 editions, where more than 1,000 experts from the academia to the corporate areas such as yours participate, identifying risks. This report also has a specific survey regarding what risks may affect the businesses per country. In this case, we have had the participation of more than 12,000 professionals, and this is important, and we will see also some risks here regarding the most important countries that are producing pulp and paper around the world. All the rest I will not be reading or exposing. I just may mention to you, and I heard some of the words of the previous people that were here in stage, and one of the topics that I got is that we must share information. Share information is key, and because of that, this presentation, you can have access to that. I have already said that to Tecnicelpa, you can have a copy of the presentation. The report of this year, and World Economic Forum launches this report each and every January. This report this year showed me something that never happened in 18 editions or in the previous 17. When we look at short-term risks and we compare them with long-term risks, can you see the differences? Are there many differences? The colors may create you a perception, and the order may create you a perception that yes, there are lots of differences. But in fact, in the most important risks, the 10 one that we have here, 9 of the short-term risks are present in the long-term risks. This means that for the first time in 18 editions, there are no longer long-term risks different from the short-term. When we look at the environment, as you said, when you look at the environment and the importance of looking at it now is because environmental risks came and they will stay on top of our concerns. Of course, some events like the terrible event we had this weekend may change some of our perceptions each and every day, because every day risks happen. And our perceptions may change, but on a long-term and short-term, environmental risks and social risks also came. Of course, they will affect economical. So, the report of this year also shows you, and I invite you to read the report each and every year, because there are lots of good informations for you, even those ones that are saying that they are not risk managers. Because we will see that some of the challenges that we said in January, all of them for the short term are happening. And when we see the event, and when we are discussing the event of this weekend in Israel, and also what we are facing for more than 1 year in Ukraine and other wars that are happening around the world, is that geoeconomics are also very important right now. And the pulp and paper industry is a global industry. And pandemics showed that also, the importance of paper in the new world that came to be. But we can also see that this report shows us some escalating risks, some that are related with the ecosystems, and you must look at that because it's part of your core business, it's part of your raw material. And some countries are already being affected by some lack of, as an example, water, as Chile is suffering about this lack of water that is also impacting their business in terms of pulp and paper, not only earthquakes like the one that happened some years ago in 2010, that impacted a lot, and we are always talking about natural and catastrophic events that affect industries, not only the economic ones. We understood and we saw, and if we read the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report, January 2020, 3 months previously to the pandemic being declared by WHO, you can read there that a study that was done on a global perspective by the end of 2019, that study showed that none of the countries were prepared to face an epidemic or a pandemic. After these years of pandemic, the national health systems are crazy, are not prepared for the new pandemic, and are not prepared to return to what was before, and we are facing big problems in national health systems around the world, not only in Portugal, for those that are Portuguese and know what we are talking about. But we are also seeing that new weapons are showing that wars are not as they were until now, that the field of war is no longer as we saw on the movies, or probably those movies that were science fiction for us now are more and more reality, and they are affecting our lives because wars are digital and wars are spatial. The field, like Asterix and Obelix said, they are there. Okay, the risk is there also, and we must look at that. Our digital rights are more and more eroded, and we must look at it. And our corporate organizations must look for our data, must look for the data of our research and investigation, must look for data of their clients, and we are being attacked each and every second, not day, second. And countries are less resilient, unfortunately, after a tremendous crisis that we had in 2008, 2009, and subsequent years. We saw countries being more resilient, but we are seeing that national debts are impacting a lot in lots of countries, and this makes these countries less resilient for the future, and this also puts us on a crossover that we must think about. And those countries where we are investing, those countries where we are exposed, we must look at their financials, at their economics, because if they are the receiver of our exports, or are the country where we will be investing, buying or merging some companies, they will probably face, and we must look at that when we have to take decisions on a go, no-go mergers and acquisitions. Risks are not isolated for those that are not risk managers. We must look at risks and look and understand how they can interconnect. It's very nice to be on a room where competitors are seated in the same table. That's very important. And because of that, and once I'm not a specialist in the pulp and paper industry, I got some information on one of my competitors, PwC. So PwC recently did a very interesting job on the report about the risks on the pulp and paper industry. And as you can see, some of them, looking at the colors, not necessarily reading all the top 20 risks, but looking at the colors, you see more economic risks than in the global risks, because they are interconnected and because we are on a macro perspective when we are looking at the global risks, and then we are more and more focusing on your industry, so the funnel is more straight. So economic risks are appearing, but you can see there that the environmental are also there, the technological are also there, and on the top 10 you also can see geopolitical risks there. And instability like the one that we have in Israel and Gaza, I was thinking about this weekend, because when Dulce asked me to send her the presentation last week, I have had prepared this speech, but not to talk about Israel. So I think none of us was considering the risk of having a war in Israel right now, and how this can affect the countries that are near, and how the Suez Canal can be closed, and how this will be impacting once again in our lives and in supply chain. Supply chain is something that affects our lives, your lives, and is one of the top risks that you must look at, and is on the second place. So don't think about risks on an isolated way. Always think about risks and how they can impact in other ones. And never forget people, because sometimes we tend to look at the economic, the environmental, and so on and so on and so on. But what we see in this room is people. And all what happens impacts on us. So social risks are the basic on our lives. And what we do is impacted by all the other risks. And how we react and how we perceive risks also affects the way how we react. But the funnel is more straight, and I was trying to understand what are the risks of producing eucalyptus. And they are not necessarily the same risks that we see in the global risks, but you see that end of the line, beginning of your line, the top 5 are environmental. So our job on a sustainability way or talking about is looking at the raw materials, and we will be looking at that point also, because environmental, raw materials and geopolitics are very close to each other. Understand that, look at that, because on the news you will see information, and every day when you see the news and you see that something is happening, probably this will impact on a major way or on a minor way in your lives. That's why we made this. And we can build stories with this. Oof. We can look at terrorist attack, like the one that happened in Israel. And a terrorist attack can create interstate conflicts, but also can create state collapses, but also can generate or be generated by cybercrime. And also state collapses can create erosion and social cohesion. And also natural disasters and extreme weather, because the environmental will not be treated as must be. So you can build lots of stories when you interconnect risks. And the global risks are important because we are not alone. Our risks are not the ones that are affecting us on our countries, on our regional basis only. I already said this word many times today, perceptions. Because you can say that you probably think that the major risks are not those ones. In your opinion, are others. But are your opinions, are your perceptions? And that's correct. If you go to World Economic Forum and look at the data that is there regarding global risks report, you can also deal with data and see how the corporate sees risks, how the academia see risks. And I can assure you, and also how young people see risks and how the older one see risks. The academia is not that positive as corporate or as the governmental. Those are very positive. And young people, less than 35, are very pessimistic. Not necessarily wrong. More close to the academia. But countries also look at risks on a different perspective. So the most advanced economies, on their top concerns, have different risks when compared with the emerging markets. And pulp and paper is everywhere. So every time you take decisions, understand that the ones that are talking with you perceive risks or look at you on a different perspective also. I was trying to leave this to the end of my presentation, but I will tell you now that my perception from you is that probably here we don't have 5 or 6 risk managers, we have 220 risk managers. In your lives, independent of your role, you must be a risk manager, at least of your role, because your companies need you to control risk from the micro, so that the ones that are looking at the macro can lead better and mitigate the risks that impact in the company life, in your family's life, in your community life. That's why when we take those results that we have from country to country, I took those top 5 risks, country to country, and you can see that, interesting, China and Japan have the same top risk that is quite different from the other countries, such as European ones, not considering Finland, of course, but also Portugal, that are typically economical risks. Interesting to also understand that debt crisis and cost of living crisis is also on the top of concerns of the majority of these countries. This year, for reasons that you may understand, we didn't get results from Russia, so the country is there because it is on the top of countries, but we don't have the result, but I will not cut Russia. They deserve to be there. We talked already about raw material, Gonçalo. And raw material came to the report this year with this buzzword that is polycrisis, that we didn't invent, that already exists. But when you look at this graphic, there is more specific, and it is based on the environmental especially. Many of the raw materials may change the policies of countries. Globalization is no longer as it was until the last years. Some talks between countries on a regional basis changed the way of doing business, and we must look at that. So polycrisis is much more about these 4 topics. Every time you look at a country or a regional area or a sum of countries, first think about if they are on an accelerated climate action or slow climate action. Think about if they are on a geopolitical confrontation or if they are on a geopolitical cooperation. They can be on both, depending on the countries that we are talking about. Even in the same region, neighbors can be very well with a neighbor, but not with the other one. So the results can be very different, and we must live with all of them because they will be happening. They are already happening. Because in a slow climate action and geopolitical confrontation area, we see resource constraints. Look at the countries that you are working with and understand if they are in this quadrant. Or resource control. Or resource collaboration. On all topics you have some results. Or finally, resource competition. This is important for you when you are managing, when you are looking at countries where you want to invest or you want to work with. So, end of story, and I will let you go with your works, and I think I'm corresponding with time. I had 40 minutes, and I will try to give you at least 5 or 10 for some questions if you have. Take some notes from this that I leave to you with some topics that you must think about. Try to understand these topics on a geopolitical area, on a societal, economic, technological or environmental, and think about your companies and try to understand if you are really anticipating emerging risks. Think about if you are on a strategic agility way of working, if you are facing supply chain disruptions and how you are managing that, what are you doing to manage that? If you have contingency plans for a cyber attack, for a fire, or for a new pandemic. And many other topics that you must think on your organizations. This is food for thought. Think micro, but think macro also. Think big is better than doing nothing. Okay? I hope I had the privilege to talk to 220 risk managers for the time being and for the future. Thank you.
I guess now there is some time for questions from the audience. I think the subject is so interesting and complex that I hope that there are lots of people with lots of curiosity to ask something. No?
You have my email. You can send me your questions. It will be easy. Okay. Thank you.
It looks like you were able to pass the message, and maybe the people is a little bit depressed. Maybe I can put you a question: is that among so many risks, how is possible today for a company, for managing, to take the risk, for investing in something, for doing something different? How do you think you should cope with that? I think that your last message is important. If you do nothing, maybe you are dead. But if you do something, maybe you can be dead also. So how can you choose between all of these two possibilities, because in fact the Portuguese companies, the pulp and paper Portuguese companies are connected with lots of countries in the world. We are exporting all the products, or mainly the most part of the products that we are making. So everything that is happening in Asia is coming to here, and these kind of things, as you were showing that. But you need to do something. So what is your recommendation? What should you do?
Thank you. It's a long story. I can take another 30 minutes to respond to this question. Each and every company takes risks in each and every decision. Each one of you takes decisions, sometimes thinking about the risk, not necessarily that is a risk, but you are taking each and every time you drive a car, you take thousands of decisions. So we do, in every second, we are taking a decision. Each and every word that I'm choosing is the decision. But and responding to your question, companies taking decisions and managing risk, they need to pass from, and apologies, the arrogance of saying, I already manage risk. Managing risk is more than only think about the risk. Is understand how much that risk, first of all, if it is a risk or if it is a peril. Because being attacked by a lion today, for me, is not a risk, it's a peril. I'm not exposed to any lion today. Okay? But being taken by the radar, getting back to Lisbon today with speeding, that's a risk. That's a risk. It is there. I will be exposed to that risk today. Okay? So, and because of that, I must always look at the front of my car at the number. So quantifying risk is very important. So if I can answer to your question, I would say to companies that every time you take decisions, please understand what risks you will be taking, how much they will impact, if it is a frequent risk, if it is an impactful risk, and try to quantify how much you will be exposed if you face that risk. That is the importance of taking decisions in our lives. That's how you must do in everything you do on the top of the companies or in every area that you are working. But there is also another topic for companies. That is the word appetite and tolerance. I can have low appetite to risk because I don't like risk. But my accounts, my financials, show that I have high tolerance. I have money. So companies that have money have more tolerance to risk, because if they face a problem, they can pay that risk without impact their basics. Okay? So quantifying risks is very important. So understand also when you take decisions, if you have appetite to risk, and sometimes companies are great. They have lots of appetite. They take lots of risks. But you know what? Their financials show that their tolerance is very low. And those companies will disappear very soon. They are dead. That's why we must look at the financials of our clients and our providers. Because if they are very, energetic taking decisions, probably they will be dead very soon. Because they don't understand what is taking a decision when they have a risk. But I think I'm facing people and companies that have tolerance and the right appetite.
I guess we have 3 minutes more for one question. Please.
Thank you. Carlos Brás was asking the question of how to behave on this risk question if you are sitting in Portugal and exporting to the world. Now we move from this and we go international. We go and invest in Europe, or we go and invest in South America. How do you do this? How do you do the exercise of going to, I'm not saying to Poland, but some European EU country, or going to South America or some of these more risky countries? I remember I've been working in some companies and no one has made money in Brazil, for example. Started with Sonai, for example, when I was there. So how do you do the exercise when go international, moving from Portugal to invest, building a mill or whatever in Europe or in South America, for example? Two extremes, let's say.
Thank you for your question. Being and many of the Portuguese companies know what is starting being an international company, and the previous crisis that we had made many companies, export companies, and investors abroad. So considering your question and being, I will try to respond in 1 minute. In that case, you are facing a category of risks that usually companies don't necessarily look at, and coming also from the insurance area, simply don't transfer. That are political risks. Usually we think about political risks as something regarding the government, and it is not that. Every time you think about taking decisions, go, no go to a country, being more exotic or less exotic, you are facing political risks. And when you think about Europe, you think it's not an exotic country. Probably. More and more, it is an exotic country. Because sometimes we forget the social. Because countries are changing a lot, and when we think about political risks, we also must think about how the countries are being impacted by social or societal risks, specific ones. So countries like Brazil, on an economic perspective, it is very closed, and you must think about that. But European countries are also facing terrorism. That's a political topic. And we never thought 3 years ago that we had a war inside Europe. It is here and came and it will stay. So it is also a political risk, but can be also a political or geopolitical risk that a great economy such as Germany or economies like Spain or even Portugal face more and more often natural disasters that can impact the decisions that you took investing in a specific country, in a specific region, and all the investment you have in a specific region goes with the water or goes with the wind. So every time you take decisions, also consider the environmental risks, and they can impact the geopolitical cohesion. So taking decisions on being abroad is also thinking about that, but that doesn't mean that that point only impacts when you are abroad, because it is happening also in Portugal. When we talk about natural events, no longer we need to think only about wildfires. We will be more and more exposed to other natural events, and we must think about